Well, that's the end of that. Spy X Family has now, at least for the first season, has come to an end. Will it return? Well, I hope it does next year, but that's subject to it. It was an anime adaptation based on a manga that might still be ongoing, but this isn't Naruto or Bleach or anything else like that. And even then, those shows ended. So, what's the conclusion? Well, overall, Spy X Family was probably one of the better anime coming out of this year. Is it one of the best I've seen? Quite possibly, yes. And this episode was definitely something of a bit of an odd one. There was comedy was toned down quite a fair bit. It largely focused on the big social gathering that the whole thing's been building to. And the ending itself was a bit interesting unto itself. But I'll explain that later. What amazes me was, I think it was for a fact that once again, Twilight demonstrates his clever disguise. We get an interesting outlook into the possibility of exactly what goes on. The fact that Eden Academy is one of the front lines of the Cold War between East and West in this universe. And the fact that both sides seem to be somewhat of a democracy, but the fact that Estonia has a military or secret police force definitely tells us the fact of exactly how they're both worried about politics and everything else. I think also the fact the WISE operation isn't fully mandated. And while it seems that WISE is primarily concerned of ending the conflict, Estonia might be part of some sort of Eastern Bloc that might be interested in stirring up more trouble. And even though while they do that, other things may be going on in the world. Also the fact how efficient the secret police is. Within 30 minutes you'll be in an interrogation and being tortured. So the Estonian secret police is definitely very clever. But what amazed me most of all, I think about this episode was, one, we didn't see much of Yor. But I think I was also thinking is the fact that the plan was going to fail. And Twilight was going to abandon the operation until Anya came through with it. I think it was the fact that Lloyd came down on Claire, didn't use any disguises, just came in as, pretty much I think as Lloyd Forger, the psychologist, rather than say one of the many disguises he used, such as a teacher. The other brilliant thing I think also about the whole scheme was the fact that overall, we actually met Desmond, and he was an interesting character to say the least. Wish we actually saw more of him, because he certainly would have been interesting to see. He has the biggest car, so that's certainly how important he is. But also is the fact that they have a discussion about politics, and the fact that Damien can't really address his father because of his imperial, he feels overshadowed, but he does talk to him anyway. That was nice to see. Was Damien finally telling the fact that his father that he'd done something good, he'd earned a stellar star, hopefully the first of many. I think the other thing also was the fact that Anya tries and fails. And she actually does act a bit stalkerish. The fact that a 6-year-old knows what a stalker is, well, that's a bit much, but I think Damien probably has to deal with it. So he knows when someone is probably out to observe him from a distance. He's probably picked that up from people around him, or maybe that might have been one of the few lessons his father taught him. That was interesting to see, and that was quite good. Another good thing as well was just the fact that there was a little bit of comedy in the fact that Anya tried it, and the funny thing was, it was Damien who took Anya's words to heart. Even though I failed my test, I hold my head up high. And as success, he wanted to make his father proud, and I suppose he may have done so just by telling him the fact he'd done it. He tried reading him before and it didn't go through. I think the other thing is also, the fact that if the show continues, which it might do, there might be more things to cover, but Operation Strix arc itself, but the thing is probably that the arc they've covered in the anime is over and done with. But this is a long-running, high best-selling manga, so there's going to be a lot more going on. One of the more interesting things I hope going forward, if they do more, is we get more of Anya, and more of Yor as well. Yor is probably the most interesting character, to say the least. An assassin who tries to be domestic and homely, but also tries to be something else as well. One of the most interesting things about the whole episode was just the fact that Damien, I think, finally did well and plucked up the courage, but also the fact of the plans that Twilight conceived. He tried a couple of different disguises, but have we met before? And you're like, no, we haven't. And then all of a sudden he tries a father disguise, but that might not necessarily work because if he tries a parent, the daughter or child might pick up on something like their change in behaviour. So that doesn't necessarily really work at all. So what options does he have? His options were quite limited. So in other words, I think he just goes in as himself in his hide in plain sight disguise, which is probably the most brilliant one yet. But I think the season itself has just been absolutely an absolute blast. The second part has been absolutely brilliant. You've had Yor's younger brother who seemingly will eat anything? As in the fact the fouler it tastes, or the more damage it does to him internally, the more he likes it. Also the fact that the cookie episode was probably one of the best. Just because of the fact that Yor completely, pretty much pseudo kills anybody Down they go. Woo! Clunk. I think it was nice to see the fact of the rather interesting domestic life they have. The fact that Yor actually is very good at dicing meat, but not much else. And some of the fact she's strong enough to chop through a solid wooden chopping board. The other thing I think is just the fact that it's nice to see a more rounded, well-rounded show. No ecchi, no hentai stuff. None of that. It was just homely, and that was something a bit nice. Because that, I think, is one problem that some anime has, is the fact that you got isekai, you got everything else, and sometimes it's not so bad, but sometimes it is. And sometimes it just feels just is a bit wrong in some cases. But that's just me, and I think possibly maybe it's just the fact for the type and everything else, and maybe also we're dealing with the demographic, but also for a fact there might be some sort of a context to it. I don't know. Some shows it might be part of the theming itself, the way the characters actually are made to look. But sometimes they try and make it funny, but it isn't, and at the same time it's a bit bizarre. But this one, I think, mainly focused on the domestic sort of situation. It was very, very Japanesey in its way, and at the same time very, very funny, and how a lot of things have been handled. On the whole, it's very nice to see exactly how things have been going, and how things will hopefully turn out. It was good, I think, for over the first 2 bits, and the second bit was definitely the best one by far. It was nice to see so much of it done. Some interesting character arcs. The 3-episode opener, which was quite funny, although easily someone could be foiled. The cookie episode was brilliant, and then when they did the gag again, they milked the gag for all it was worth in one episode, and they did it again, just for the absolute hell of it. And then also, I think, the dog as well. Everything about that was just, I think it was brilliant in its own way, and each character, like Anya, giving subtle messages, trying to do her best, wanting to live almost like a fantasy world of wanting to be a super spy, but not really being 6 years old, she doesn't know what to do. And also the fact that, yes, Yor is scary. Very, very scary when she wants to be. The point where literally she can scare the pants off an attack dog. That was brilliantly done. And I think just the fact I think it's the fact they do the reaction as if something like that. If someone was to do that in real life, I think we'd go, what the? I don't know, going, what the? That scene itself, that was always brilliant. I think it's the fact of how we would react when we saw something like that. Putting that in the show, like, doing that was one of the best moments I think about this whole anime, was just the fact of they made the reactions almost like, what the hell? What did I just see? And making everyone's jaw fall on the ground, even the dogs in an anthropomorphic way. That was brilliant. That joke never gets old. And it will never get old. But suffice to say, this episode was probably one of the, I guess, less dramatic. But at the same time, it was nice to see. It was nice to see Damien finally coming out of his shell a little bit more around his father. It was nice to see the whole thing rounded off with a nice little bow. And it was nice to see how everything's gone and done. It was all done and handled very nicely. Well, I've been the Universal Challenger, asking you to please leave a like, comment, and subscribe. Wishing you a very Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year, and I'll catch you on the next one. Cheerio, and Merry Christmas! Ooh, 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 ooh.